There's no doubt about it. Homeowners insurance is becoming more and more expensive, and in many places more difficult to find. The culprits: climate change, the rising cost to rebuild or make repairs, and a sharp increase in the premiums from reinsurance companies that are used by insurers to limit their risk. Major insurance companies have already virtually pulled out of Florida market, leaving homeowners paying premiums nearly 4 times higher than those paid elsewhere in the country because of the flood damage. This is because hurricane risk is part of Florida's problem. Hurricane Ian that happened last year in 2022 was the most expensive storm ever to hit the state. Carriers have been so profitable over the last 20 years, averaging around $55 billion in profit annually. So any carrier before that was losing money, of which there were just a few that existed, it was pretty much just due to poor management, because the market forces were favorable for every homeowners insurance company to be evergreen. Yet because of the rise in natural disasters, the insurance industry says that rebuilding and replacement costs surged 55% between 2019 and 2022. And the reinsurance, the type of insurance that used by insurers to limit their risk, has also gone up between 30% and 40% after years of losses in the industry. But Florida is not the only state where natural disasters are causing insurers to pull back from the market. There's California that deals with the forest fires. 2 of the largest national insurers already, State Farm and Allstate, are no longer writing new homeowners policies in California, partly because of the increased risk of wildfires. But other coastal states will be impacted too. But just because you're not in the coast or in California or in any coastal areas does not mean you're insulated from natural disasters as well as from this homeowners insurance problem. Before we get into the impact of climate change and homeowners insurance policy, this is the Legal Code, and on this channel we discuss various legal topics, whether that relates to laws coming down the pike that I think that you should be concerned about or public policy. We discuss it here. Occasionally we touch on celebrity shenanigans, but only if there's a legal component from which you can learn. So if you like that sort of thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share with anyone else you think will find value in this sort of content. Also, I am a real life attorney. I specialize in small business and estate planning. So if you're struggling with your small business or with deciding where to begin with your estate plan, you are just confused with there's so many options out there, where do you begin, then you can schedule a consultation with me. There's a link in the description box. Also, I have facilitated a medical tourism trip for the many millions of Americans that are underinsured or don't even have insurance, and so because of that they can't even see a doctor. So I created a trip for Americans to travel to Colombia and access health care at an affordable rate. Colombia is ranked number 18 in the world when it comes to health care. It outranks both the United States and Canada and some European nations. It has become more and more every year an international hub for foreigners to access health care at affordable rate. All accommodations are paid for in a flat fee, as well as your diagnostics, your transportation, your meals. So it's a really economical trip and an opportunity for you to see what other countries offer as it relates to healthcare. Healthcare is a right in Colombia and not based on market forces, not based on whether or not you can afford it, which makes it so much more egalitarian for not only Colombians and nationals, but also internationally for the international market. So I implore you to begin thinking about becoming a medical tourist if you're struggling with your health, if you have medication that's just not affordable in the United States. It's priced at a premium in the United States, whereas in Colombia it's going to be less and less expensive. If you are struggling, you need to pay for an implant in the United States. It can run you $4,000 minimum to start. That's not even post-care, pre-care, just for the implant is $4,000. Whereas in Colombia, it would be 70-80% less. So that's just to give you an idea of how inexpensive the healthcare is. Cardiac surgery, 60-70% less than what is charged in the United States. Also, if you're a retired person thinking about relocating and you can't afford the cost of living in the United States, then think about taking this trip. This is an opportunity for you to get a taste of what it's like living in Colombia for a few weeks. You'll be there with a guide to be able to explain things to you if you're thinking about relocating in terms of the cost of living, how expensive food is, how inexpensive food is, what's transportation like, what's the infrastructure of Colombia. So all of that you also get to experience if you're thinking about expatriating from the United States. Climate change isn't the only factor making properties uninsurable. Insurance companies also point to the rising cost of replacing homes as inflation for building supplies and labor has soared. The companies also blame limits placed on insurance premiums in some states, including California. For the reinsurers, it's not just inflation, but increases in frequency of events, frequency of natural disasters. Insurers are responding rationally to the growing losses and growing risk by declining to write new insurance. The risk is just too great for the insurance companies to make any money because they are paying out frequently with the increase of natural disasters. American insurers already have a history of cutting back coverage in the face of disasters. There's so many jokes about the uselessness of insurance companies when you actually need it. The first big rupture in the US insurance market happened decades ago when most companies stopped covering flooding. Companies decided flooding was just uninsurable. That's because it's complicated to figure out which places will flood and how often these floods would occur. They did not have the maps or the statistical basis to calculate what the premiums could be, which is the bread and butter of insurance. That led the federal government to create the National Flood Insurance Program in 1968, and it now provides the vast majority of residential flood insurance in the United States. The program is backed by taxpayer dollars, but it is chronically in debt, no surprise there, and is increasingly unaffordable by homeowners because it was not designed for the enormous climate risks that the US now faces. In the decades since the program's creation, climate change has made other types of disasters like hurricanes and wildfires more unpredictable and expensive, which is slowly undermining private insurance markets state by state. After Hurricane Andrew caused an estimated $26 billion of damage in 1992, the state's insurance market was falling apart. So this has been going on for 30 years. Some insurers went bankrupt back then. Others pulled back, and the price of insurance rose for homeowners in Florida. 13 years later, Hurricane Katrina unleashed a home insurance meltdown in Louisiana. In both states, private insurance markets never fully recovered. That pushed more homeowners to rely on special state-run plans that are only available if you can't get homeowners insurance through a private company. Those state-run insurers of last resort were forced to take on billions of dollars in homeowner insurance policies that no private company would accept. Uninsurable places are growing across the 50 states, but that's especially true for California, Florida, Louisiana, which have larger and more frequent disasters, hurricanes, wildfires. There are different factors at play in all three states, but similar outcomes are happening. More people are being driven to state-supported insurance as a last resort, where they typically have to pay more money for a narrower policy. While Allstate and State Farm have declined to write new policies, smaller insurers in states like Louisiana and Florida have gone bankrupt totally, driving people out of their insurance altogether. For instance, in Louisiana, 17% of homeowners insurance policy had their policies canceled in 2022, according to an annual report from Louisiana State University. Meanwhile, more than 2/3 of policyholders said homeowners and flood insurance are more expensive in Louisiana than other states. More and more states are looking to state-backed insurance providers to be the insurer of last resort from homeowners who are not able to find policies elsewhere. But in Florida, Citizens Property Insurance, the state insurance provider for the last 20 years, has also seen the number of policies rise about 50% in the last year because of the private companies pulling out of Florida. So insurers don't have to write policies in all 50 states. They're going to write policies where they think they can get a return on capital. But these states are not alone. It's predicted that New York and the coastal states will also become uninsurable as well because of the frequency of natural disasters that are happening year after year. So several factors have converged to make adequate, reasonably priced home insurance harder to get. State agencies regulate the insurance industry, and they are trying to keep rates low for residents, even as weather gets more extreme from global warming. And as a result, insurers say they can't increase rates enough to compensate for the damage occurring in the riskiest places. So the problem as insurance companies see it is that they can't charge enough to cover their bills after a major disaster. Yet, people continue to move to coastal regions, which are vulnerable to hurricanes, and to rural forested areas around the country that are prone to wildfires. When homes get destroyed, inflation is making it more expensive to rebuild. All the while, the rising temperatures driving disasters are caused primarily by burning fossil fuels that insurance companies themselves continue to underwrite and invest in. It's inevitable that the United States is marching steadily toward an uninsurable future. The shrinking of home insurance options come at a time when most American families have little in savings and many can't get a loan to repair a house that's damaged or destroyed. So when people can't get home insurance or have adequate coverage, the consequences are profound. That impacts real estate, it impacts construction, it impacts lending. Just as a human being, if you want to be able to stay where you live and where your job is and where your children attend school, you want to be able to rebuild your home. You have to have a solvent insurance company that provides good coverage so that you can rebuild your life. Now, some states are looking for new ways to regulate insurance as the earth gets hotter. New York and Connecticut, for example, are pushing insurance companies to come up with strategies for managing the risk associated with climate change by considering both current and future hazards. That's a change from the modeling that's used by most property insurance in the US, which primarily based on historical examples, even as the past is becoming less reflective of the future, shaped by global warming. Looking back to those statistics may not be as useful as it had before. That reliance on backward-looking data or previous weather patterns has created a disconnect. The biggest problem facing insurance market in the US is partly of the industry's own making. Temperatures are on track to increase to levels that will make climate impacts like storms and heat waves a lot more destructive. But insurers continue to underwrite and invest in fossil fuel companies anyway. Despite criticism from lawmakers and activists, it seems nonsensical at best and complicit at worst for State Farm to carefully factor climate risk from wildfires into its homeowners' insurance policies while refusing in some cases to provide such policies at all, while apparently ignoring the heightened climate risk that its investment portfolio is helping to create. Given the near certainty that the impacts of climate change will get worse, experts say it is critical to build homes that are more resilient. Roofs can be constructed to withstand hurricane force winds and flying embers. Awnings can be designed so they don't act like sails during a storm, ripping away and causing substantial damage. And in areas prone to wildfires, homes can be built out of fire-resistant materials, and adjacent land can be cleared of flammable brush. Making homes more resilient is one of the solutions in states like California, where almost everyone is vulnerable. The insurance industry and state regulators strongly support efforts to build more robust protection for homes against physical threats, but they don't have the power to require them. Instead, insurers try to incentivize more resilient building or retrofits by offering more premium discounts to homeowners. Multiple states have programs to help pay for retrofits, and the federal government is trying to incentivize the building of more resilient homes by making disaster-related funds more available to places that have stronger building codes. An Alabama initiative to upgrade roofs prevented so much hurricane damage that Louisiana is considering copying it. Ultimately, though, it will be impossible to safely live in some areas. That's already true for dozens of neighborhoods and towns that are relocating away. In the future, slowing down or even stopping development in riskiest areas is ultimately part of the solution to rising insurance losses as well. There could be parts of states that are completely uninhabitable, that are just not suitable for insurance because really they're not suitable for home building. But for now, restricting development is not, of course, popular with most politicians. Even the forecast looks dire for the insurance industry. What can be done? We can't control hurricanes, we can't control natural disasters, but we can build to limit flooding. The Dutch, for instance, leads the world in flood management. More than 50% of the Netherlands is below sea level, which has encouraged the Dutch to look for innovative water management solutions. It was one of the most flood-prone areas in the past, but almost never floods now. Holland is about twice the size of New Jersey and is one of the world's most densely populated countries. Much of it is below sea level, yet the Dutch don't bother with flood insurance at all because they build to prevent the flooding with protective dikes along the coastline, and many Dutch rivers represent the proactive and preventative measures that the country has taken against the consistent threats of flooding. Now, climate change, however, will fully up the ante in Holland, and of course they have to continue to develop their flood systems because of the threat of rising sea levels, increasing the frequency of heavy rains and storms. The idea of essentially damming up, for instance, New York Harbor sounds extreme, but that's the equivalent to what the Dutch did with the Zuiderzee works, excuse my Dutch, and especially the Delta Works projects undertaking after the 1953 flood in Holland. Some of the Dutch works are permanent dikes, but others are open that merely shut when storms are coming to block surges. The idea is to, in effect, shorten your coastline, which makes it easier to defend with high walls. I'm going to do a follow-up video about perhaps the solutions that can be done in terms of the infrastructure to deal with these natural disasters. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections about where you could be living and possibly your home being uninsurable. Have you thought about this? Are you in Florida, for instance, and you are experiencing this? Or you're in a coastal area and you've experienced this already, relying on the state-funded insurance companies and how costly that is? Let me know your comments in the comment section. And for those people who think that, oh, it doesn't impact me, it impacts all of us. Even if you live in a high-rise, when you come down, if you come down from your high rise and your neighborhood is completely flooded. You won't be able to go to the grocery store. You won't be able to get to work. So it impacts all of us. Natural disasters, climate change impacts all of us. So no longer are the days where people could say, oh, that's that region's problem. That's that area's problem. That's not my problem. No, it's all of our problems at this point. And I will see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye-bye.